This is a video about an M-rated game. It contains things you see all the time on CNN and words that you see on Facebook every 5 minutes. Well, it's been a weird summer for me, and I can't believe I'm looking forward to going back to school. Fortunately, we're going to the best one we can get into. Hope's Peak Academy, where only the best of the best are allowed to attend. Think going to an Ivy League school is the best you can do? People at this school will laugh in your face. Only students with an ultimate ability in something can get in, ranging from something as nebulous as ultimate luck to something as specific as ultimate fanfic creator. However, they want as many ultimate talents as they can get their hand on, so you might be sharing your class with the ultimate biker gang leader as well. And when they're willing to admit some rather amoral ultimates into their facility, well, it becomes predictable something bad happens. As soon as you enter, you fall unconscious, wake up with all the exits and windows sealed, and have no way to contact the authorities as a strange teddy bear says the only way to get out is to kill someone and get away with it. This is the setup for one of my favorite mystery game series, Danganronpa, and I am a sucker for good mysteries. While there's a number of games and spin-off media, I'll only be covering the 3 main games, as well as the side game Ultra Despair Girls. My focus isn't so much on the franchise as a whole, but how the video games have started and evolved over time. Not just to give us an enjoyable gameplay experience and interesting mysteries, but also characters that are just as interesting, intriguing, varied, and often surprising as the mysteries themselves. And while the games and most of the other media allows you to start anywhere without missing out on anything, that means that nearly everything else in the series has unhidden spoilers about the first game. Mostly the identity of the mastermind that set all this off, as well as fates of some of the characters and some of their hidden secrets. With that in mind, let me go over what these videos coming up will be like. In this review of the first game, I will not be revealing identities of the killers, the victims, and hidden identities of people such as who the mastermind is. This is a mystery game, and as such, solving the mystery is a major part of the gameplay and experience. Now, with the spoilers excised from the video, I still am going to be able to analyze the characters and the story. Possibly not fully, but good enough to get the points across. In future videos for this series, where things such as survivors and identities are unavoidable due to the plot, then I will give a deeper look into the characters from this game and others, where they are more relevant and we have a bigger picture about who they are and what has happened. If you don't want to play the game to see things for yourself, then there are many Let's Plays for it, including the original fan translation of the game on Something Awful, which is what helped Danganronpa reach Western audiences to begin with. However, I will ask, and keep this in mind for similar situations, if you watch a playthrough or whatever and you liked how the game worked out, you saw it, you read it, whatever, and you like how it was, the games are cheap enough to give some money to the developers for the enjoyment you got from them. Give some support and respect to the people that you like for these things, you know? Now then, let's begin. A consistent thing to note about the series is that us as viewers or players would have a hard time getting past the ridiculousness to become invested in it if it wasn't for how the students become our viewpoint into the rules and consistencies of the setting, as well as their reactions taking the situation seriously. Obviously this works better in some cases than others, not just in these games but in general. But Danganronpa, I think, is a good example of at least trying to get it done right. Or to put it simply, they are helping sell the reason for why we should care about the situation and the characters. This is accented by the fact that even though we as normal, moral human beings hopefully wouldn't be goaded easily into becoming murderers, the game sets up a believable situation to get the ball rolling. As far as they know, the characters don't know each other, and a few of them keep harping on that fact until it plants a seed of doubt in everybody. This turns into a shared paranoia that the mastermind begins to exploit and build upon, especially with what amount to motivation speeches. This is a horrifyingly realistic way to get the ball rolling for the story, and a clear example of how just because the situation is a little ludicrous, the game is going to stay within certain bounds of reasonableness for the events that will unfold. So, who are these characters that are supposed to be so good at helping the game? Considering they're the most important aspect of the series, I see no reason why I can't start my analysis with them.
Before we go any farther, I guess I should introduce myself. My name's Makoto Naegi.
Makoto, the ultimate lucky student. He earned his place in class and that title by effectively winning a raffle. He's the character we play the game through, and meant to come off as an everyman-style character who doesn't really have anything truly special or unique about him, except for maybe a bit more optimism than the others. But then again, in this game, some of the other Ultimates don't really have their abilities come into play that often anyway. However, the big theme of the game is hope and despair, and Makoto certainly seems to have a lot of hope surrounding him in the game, either being the source of it or finding ways to share hope. And that brings me to an observation that while he begins earning respect from the group for his performances during the trials and other situations in the game, I don't think anyone in the group can actually be labeled as a leader. By the end of the game, it feels like everything's been a group dynamic, and solutions have been found by putting everybody's heads together, especially during the trials, instead of just one person or a handful of them being the ones that are able to handle everything. Makoto is a fairly important piece of the puzzle to solving a lot of the mysteries. He's a player character after all. But everyone else does have their time and moments to shine. Which I guess is an interesting way to show that just because characters are important to the story or the franchise, they don't have to be the only ones that do important things. And while I really can't criticize the blank slate feel he has sometimes, I do think a lot of his inner monologuing could have been cut. I'll discuss that a little more later because it's not so much a problem with the character but the writing and presentation.
I'm Kiyotaka Ishimaru. I believe in bold simplicity. Let's work together on our educational crusade.
I love this guy, especially how he's written in X. The ultimate moral compass, he always comes off as a zealous team leader. And I do mean zealous in some pretty enjoyable ways. He isn't just funny, but also generally entertaining. He wants to keep everyone's spirits up and keep the group working together. But at the same time, his personality feels like, at times, he would be a pretty cool guy to hang with.
Not that you'll remember my name anyway, but... I'm Toko Fukawa.
Toko is another of my favorite characters in the series, but in this game, major spoilers are attached to those reasons. She's the ultimate writing prodigy, and has a few tricks involved with her that help solve the mystery of the school and the events surrounding it. On the surface of her, however, her character is a very antisocial one with an inferiority complex, and she constantly pushes others away or belittles them when she thinks she can get away with it. And this often does lead to a bit of humor and people's bewilderment at her antics. Now, eventually she gets the hots for Byakuya, and this leads to something that could possibly be an uncomfortable thing about her character. Now, Byakuya is the kind of character that makes snide comments and belittlements toward everybody, but in Toko's case, she's actively acting on those belittlements and statements, taking things literally so that she can do something to impress him. She's effectively becoming obsessive over him to the point of a one-sided, submissive, dominant relationship where most of the time it seems like she would be the submissive and meek one. However, there are moments it seems that she wants to flip the script on that. Now, of course, the game is playing this off a comedy. Make your opinions on that what you will. However, the game has the characters as well as Toko herself point out that they realize how toxic this relationship that she's imagining would actually be. In the end, Toko is a train wreck of mental and social issues, and her shyness and submissiveness are just a couple of the handful of ways she winds up coping with it. And a lot of the other classmates do make their attempts to reach out to her. And rest assured, there are things about Toko that show she is either willing to put up lines that she won't cross, as well as has ways of pushing back if she needs to.
Hi, I'm Sayaka Marzona. I look forward to getting to know you.
Sayaka, the ultimate pop idol. She actually went to middle school with Makoto and is the source of some of his history. Now, a lot of the history and info you discover about characters comes from when you go out and talk to them during the free time events between murders and trials. Sayaka gets a good bit of her story explained in the story proper, without having to hunt it down, as it were. She's like most of the other characters in the game, in that by the end of the story, you feel like you have learned a lot about her without having to dig any deeper. Also, I enjoy the running gag they gave her. It might not necessarily be funny as a joke, but it's still a nice character quirk to give her without being something overly goofy or obnoxious.
Yo, the name's Leon Kuwata. What's up?
Leon is a character that helps accent how just because the students have ultimate skills, they don't have to be written wholly within those confines. While everyone else has their depth and development in various forms throughout the game, Leon is a character that actually doesn't like his ultimate skill. The story itself tells us early on he's actually trying to become a punk rock star with the money he's making from being a baseball star. This is something that makes him stand out a bit more from some of the others, whom typically live up to or defend their ultimate ability, even if we don't see it in action.
I am Hifumi Yamada, but if you want to call me by my nickname,
The Alpha and the Omega!
I don't mind.
I'll start by saying that I enjoy his voice work and think it was well done. And by the end of the game we get hints that he's a kind-hearted person trying to do good, as well as other things hinting that he was more than just what was presented to us. Unfortunately, he's the ultimate fanfic creator, and this is where we fall into the trap of a character being written entirely around what their ultimate skill is. And to be clear, I blame most of my distaste for his character with the writing and the story presentation of him, honestly. He's presented as a cookie-cutter Hollywood stereotype of anime nerds, and that includes perverted dispositions, including a running gag about how he has no interest in real women because he is entirely focused on 2D. It's not so much that the character is annoying or repulsive at times, and he is. It's just that it's more he feels uninspired and not really different from what's come before and what we've seen before. And to be honest, it gets a little distracting with this character because of how blatantly it's played up to us. Especially how other characters in the game are presented when they're in a position where they could have been used as safe, cookie-cutter archetypes. To put it this way, when Monokuma makes jokes or comments that are fairly risque or mature, he's using it more in a mocking manner. Kifumi's antics are played straight to give the feeling that we're meant to laugh at him.
Heya! I'm Aoi Asahina, but my friends just call me Hina. Sup?
From one of my least favorites, we come to one of my favorites in the game. Aoi is the ultimate swimming pro, and by God does she have a lot of energy and character. Honestly, she comes off more of an everyman character than Makoto does, and I think it's because she's not in the hero role, playable character form like Makoto is, so she has more room to be normal or have moments and reactions that are unhindered by requiring them to be viewed by the player, related to by the player, or controlled by the player. Effectively, she has room to be her own person. And she always seems to have interesting conversations or interactions with other characters in the game, and she has a few moments in the spotlight, both big and small, throughout the story. I actually find her a little more relatable, and even if we don't get to see her ultimate skill in action, her character is built up in such a way that when she does discover the pool, her reaction feels completely natural in terms of the person and character that we've come to know by that point.
Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Chihiro Fujisaki.
She is one of the more complicated and interesting characters in the story. I wish I could go deeper than that, but that is a major spoiler. Like Toko, she has an inferiority complex, but she went in a different direction with how it influenced her. She's constantly concerned with how others perceive her, and constantly tries to take actions based off of or affirming those views about her. She's definitely not one for confrontation, but still wants to become better, and her attempts to break free of that shell cause a few memorable moments in the story of the game. While I can't say for sure how her efforts to become stronger and more assertive would affect her character and the path she takes in the long run, in the end I think she's just someone that wants to be who she wants to be, and be accepted and respected for it, even if she winds up being seen differently for it. I'd love to give a deeper analysis on her about all this, but it would be an incredibly huge spoiler. Just know that she is one of the more interestingly written characters in the entire series, and there is no shortage of competition for that.
My name is Kyoko Kirigiri.
She doesn't remember what her ultimate skill is, and that, of course, winds up being an important part of the mystery. It does start getting obvious fairly quick what she's good at, though. She's generally a loner that's good at figuring out things, but unlike Byakuya, she tries to help out everybody instead of actually being a selfish prick about it. I like how her character was done, and there's some depth that wasn't shown until later in the game. She's a good example also of how the character portraits and artwork are used to help accent who the characters are and what they're thinking. She's one of the more important characters of the story, but overall she doesn't actually hog the spotlight that much. Again, this is a game where everybody gets their chance to have moments in the spotlight and their time to shine when solving the mysteries. And just because Kyoko and a handful of others are the smartest, doesn't necessarily mean they can be the only ones to help solve it.
Hi, I'm Junko Enoshima. Charmed, I'm sure.
The ultimate fashionista. Her voice work, writing, and presentation is one of the standouts of the series. The story proper gives her moments to impress us, and even outside the story, her bombastic personality is wonderful. She is one of my favorite characters of her type in any medium, and definitely memorable. And even with all that, while the game gives her some flirty comments and jokes to go with how she's dressed, even early on we feel there's more to her than just looking good for the cameras. In fact, you could say she's just playing it up.
Name's Mondo Owada. Nice to fucking meet ya.
Mondo. He's another well-presented character in the game with some openly loud and crazy moments that I actually enjoy. He may not have the chance to be a biker gang leader in the story itself, but his character definitely sells the idea that that's what he is. I love the snake design he has going with him, and interestingly, he isn't just a loudmouth badass who seemingly wants to pick a fight or prove how tough he is, but he also has an honor and respect toward others when he feels it's appropriate. Once or twice, he even goes out of his way to apologize for taking things too far, and actually does have moments of defending others.
I am Sakura Okami.
The ultimate martial artist, and quite frankly, she looks it. Her intimidating voice and presentation belie the fact that she's still a kind person underneath. She's also very willing to step in and do what's necessary to protect everyone, including threatening to knock some skulls a few times. Another memorable character from the game, her ultimate ability actually does come into play a few times.
Name's Byakuya Togami.
I hinted at this guy earlier. We're told he's the ultimate affluent prodigy. But he's written and presented as the ultimate insufferable rich jackass. As Celeste describes him, he considers victory his destiny and has lived his life accordingly. Now, I know I'm a little harsh in how I feel about him in this game, and it's possible he was written as a critique about elite business families, in Japan specific, or just in general. Unfortunately, the story doesn't give us the details on what made his character to actually deep instead of just shallow. The short version is he had to outperform all his other siblings to become the leader of the family fortune, and all his other siblings got disowned by the family in return. Therefore, he feels that if he doesn't succeed, he therefore dishonors those that he defeated. And I think that's an interesting take on the type of character he is, but it's only discovered if you do enough free time events with him, which are optional and therefore missable. And I'm effectively ragging on all this about Byakuya because if you want us to understand the characters as you want them to be understood, then things like an optional conversation that gives us a lot of depth to the character and his motivations and reasons for being how he is probably shouldn't be optional. When we can miss out on important aspects of a character, we miss out on them.
I'm Yasuhiro Hagakure. Hero for short. Take it easy, yeah? I know I will.
Yasuhiro, the ultimate clairvoyant. He's a wacky, goofy oaf that's usually the one to get things wildly wrong, but I can't help but like the character. He's a clairvoyant, but he actually hates the occult, and because he's untrained, he only gets about 30% of his predictions right. And we get very vague hints that his visions are real, but he's unable to interpret them correctly. A moment during the game where he discusses his hamburger is a good sign of that, where him connecting the imaginary dots of a wild event lead to him making a proper conclusion. And one of the predictions he gives later in the game does in fact actually come true. He's given to us as a bumbling comic relief type as the game goes on, but still has room to play with how his character is presented. That said, he is the cause of the story taking a screeching halt during a trial, where he's convinced that one of the classmates is a ghost. This wouldn't have been so much of a problem if the ranting and raving during the trial led to new information. However, it instead just wastes everybody's time for about 15 or 20 minutes just to add an attempt at humor in the game that feels like it goes on a little too long.
I do not think we have been introduced. I am Celestia Ludenberg.
The Ultimate Gambler, which I would have loved to see how they could have written that to come into play, but sadly it doesn't, at least in an overt way. However, her writing and presentation is great, and it really plays up and sells the regal airs she gives herself. And on that note, I absolutely love what the English voice actress was able to do with this character, and it might be the best performance of vocal technique in the game. Honestly, the more I think about it, the more I want to say her skill does come into play. It's just, she's not so much gambling as having an amazing poker face with what she lets others know and see. Monokuma, the bear, the myth, the legend. The evil headmaster that controls the killing games he forced the students into. Most of the killings come from how he gets under the students' skin or into their minds and pokes around on the right buttons. And even then, the ones who survive still have moments they might not be proud of because of his dickery. He's like a cross between the Joker and Teddy Ruxpin. Also, nearly all of the musical themes and songs that involve his character are very memorable and enjoyable in my opinion. He's darkly funny, twisted in logic and actions, and when push comes to shove, he does show why he's a threat to be taken seriously. He's definitely one of the most unique villains I've seen, and in this game I think he might be at his strongest, but it might just be he's equally good in all of them. So after all that, I hope I've been able to explain how much care and attention was given to the writing and the presentation of the characters in the game. And while it's not necessarily a rule that because you worked hard on the characters or the writing that automatically makes them good, this is a game that understands the importance of the attention it needed to give these characters, because if it didn't do a good job on that, then we as the player or the viewer wouldn't care about the characters, which means that we also wouldn't care about the situation they're in, which means we wouldn't care about the story, which means we wouldn't care about the game. Now, the characters aren't the only thing that makes a good game. Playing the damn thing makes it a game. Danganronpa is a visual novel that allows you to spend time walking around and building reputation and relationships with the rest of the classmates. When someone inevitably dies in this murder mystery game, you walk around investigating and gathering clues. This leads into the trials, where gameplay turns from simply moving around and talking to people into a sort of shooting game. In an interesting usage of the phrase, you literally shoot down arguments and discussion in the trials by using the bullets made from the clues you've discovered. There's variations on this, such as shooting letters to make a word, or a sort of rhythm game where you lock on and shoot multiple words at once. But in the end, reflexes aren't necessarily needed as much as knowing what the right answers are. But the big thing is, the trials are where the voice actors really get a chance to shine. The voice work in this game is generally well done, and I really wish there was more of it. File size limitations be damned. The character interactions are well done, and the music works great. Either being a perfect tone for the situation, such as thinking music, or constantly building up as the trial goes on. Now, there is a little hint that I want to give for the trials. At any point in time, it allows you to open up the handbook menu so that you can review your information and clues and other things such as that. The menu that you open also allows you to save the game wherever you pretty much want in the middle of the trials. So if you think you're having a little bit of trouble with the trial, or you're not sure you know what the answer is, then you can always put down a save and use some trial and error.
It's punishment time!
Alright, too much. Won't do it again. Sorry.
Hey, come on now!
Also, if you're thinking of trying to get the story to move along faster by taking the option to skip the free time events and talking to the other students, keep in mind that taking the time to talk with the others eventually unlocks skills that you can use to make the trials easier to get through. I also want to take a moment to draw attention to the artwork, which it may or may not be your thing, but I think it does stand out in terms of an identity for the series. I don't think I've seen anything else that matches the drawing and art style the game uses. I feel it gets even better during the cutscenes where we get some motion to it all, mostly in the executions. And the executions generally aren't explicitly bloody or gory, but they are still quite brutal for a lot of them, and they definitely deliver the tense and horrifying feeling they're meant to convey. The art changes up a bit during the closing arguments comic that you have to piece together during the trials. Even that style works well because of how it keeps the manic and sinister tone of the murders. Something else rather iconic about the series is the pink blood it uses. Now this was actually for censorship reasons in Japan where it originated, but because of that the team effectively got another recognizable hallmark of the series pretty much by accident. Now, before I get into the criticisms I have with this game, I'll just say here that even if I don't think that this is the best game in the series, it still is a good game, especially for the mystery genre. And I think it's a very strong start to the franchise as a whole. If you're a fan of the mystery genre, then this is definitely something that I recommend you try out. However, now is the time that we start getting into my criticisms for the game, both minor and major. Now, of course, some of these can be chalked up to growing pains for the first game in the series and things such as that, but we aren't going to learn anything by not taking a look at them. To start with, this is a visual novel, emphasis on the novel part. The advertisements already make clear this is a game where a bunch of students are locked in a school and start killing each other to escape. I understand introducing everybody and making sure the setup of the setting, the situation, and the characters are all made and understood, but I wish it didn't take as long as it did to get to that explanation in the game itself. I'm not sure if it took a full hour, but it certainly felt like it. Also, things like flashbacks in the game can get very repetitive. There's an infamous scene where revelations are given at the end of a chapter, and then when the next chapter begins, about 1 minute later, you get the entire scene replayed in full. And there's also a few more times that the scene is flashed back to as well. And most of the time that it replays it to us, it's not because there's new revelations or information pertaining to that scene. It's more or less just so we can be reminded. Also, similar to the flashbacks, I think that we have too many instances of inner monologues and inner thoughts of the main character especially. I mean, I get what they're going for. It's like the old-timey detective shows where you have the hard-boiled narration Sam Spade or Johnny Dollar likes to give.
My name is Sergeant Frank Drebin, Detective Lieutenant, Police Squad, a special division of the police department. There'd been a recent wave of murders at the city zoo. I was bringing in a suspect when I got a call from headquarters about the kidnapping of Terry Burton.
Now, done right, that helps build the characters and the story. Done wrong, it feels like pointless rambling. Inner monologues aren't inherently bad, but care should be taken with how people look at them in the context of what everything surrounding them is like. At times, the game feels less like it wants us to organically process and feel our own emotions about scenes, and more the writers telling us through Makoto's thoughts how we should be feeling. But to be clear, there are plenty of moments where Makoto's inner thoughts give us insight into his character, how he's processing his own emotions, and things such as that. But, for God's sake, I could swear he says the same 5 boxes of text for each and every trial, and it gets to me. Now, obviously, this isn't unique to this game in any way, but I do want these videos to analyze things we can not just appreciate or respect in art and media, but also learn from. A good game, movie, book, whatever, we know why we like it, and we can put words to it. And we might not feel that there's any need to improve it, but we can still learn from what it's done good. We can also learn from what a bad game or movie has done bad, how that can either be improved or avoided. So, nothing that I've talked about so far feels like it needs to have been removed or excised from the game to make it better. Now, some of the lines could have been removed to make things flow a little better. Some things could have been reworked to be a little more effective, but effectively they're mostly harmless. That said, there is one thing that should have been removed completely, and was removed from further games in the series: the reaction system. Like I said, emphasis on novel in this visual novel, so a majority of the game is talking. The trials are kind of a reward and climax of the chapters. Again, not a bad thing, but the reaction system is where things start going wrong. When talking to people, you'll eventually get pink text that you need to highlight and select in order to get people to continue to talk about that topic. The reaction system is redundant at best and worthless at its worst. The game will not progress with the story until you've talked to the right people and heard the right conversations from them. Meaning that important info that is within the reaction selections that you have to make are things that they should have just said they were going to say anyway, and more or less naturally would have said anyway. You push buttons to continue the conversation. It's just you're pushing more buttons to do what one push used to do. Now I think that puts an end to the analysis of the game and gameplay and surface level stuff about the characters. So now I think is a good time to dip into some of the spoilers and surprises in the game. Like I made clear before, I am going to be avoiding identities and things that can influence the trials. However, these characters don't show up until a little bit after the game goes through, and after they appear, they do become important to the story. So if you want, you can count these as light spoilers, and if you don't want to hear them, feel free to skip ahead to the credits where I have a little bit of a mystery game for you guys to try out yourselves. And if you want, check out the game on your own time and come on back. In the meantime, since these characters are a part of the story, I feel it's worth analyzing them. I want to try to discuss these characters to keep the game enjoyable to the people who are going in with, ears unspoiled, eyes wide open, and keep some surprises tied to them. The labels these two characters have is Genocide Jack and the Mastermind. Both of them show up in the story because both of them have ties to the students. And I won't be getting any less vague than that. Now that said, both of these characters do show up and get discussed in future games in the series. And like I said, when they show up in these future games in the series, then I'll be giving them a deeper analysis. To start with, just like the Mastermind, Genocide Jack is discussed early in the game before they can make their appearance. And a lot of their usage in the game is mostly for irreverent and slightly outlandish humor after they become a part of things. But there are moments they're presented as an actual danger, limited only by the rules of the killing game. After all, Genocide Jack is a serial killer. Most of Jack's antics and discussions surround Byakuya, which lends to some humor in the game where his stuffy shirt personality has to deal with a giggling loon that won't leave him alone. That said, because of the nature of Genocide Jack's character, they have outside information that helps progress the plot and solve the mysteries surrounding the situation of the game as it goes on. The Mastermind, however, stands tall as a villain, and became a fan favorite for good reason. their presence is felt and repeatedly referenced through the other games and parts of the franchise. Now, naturally, you only get to find out who they are during the final chapter, and even then, you still have to solve the mystery of who they are before they reveal themselves. This is where the final trial begins to feel like a boss battle, because you not only have to use evidence and reasoning picked up from throughout the entire game to unmask them and discover their motivations, but after they appear and after everything's said and done, you still have to come to your own conclusions about why they went through with their motivations and what truths they've told are true. And their motivation is definitely a part of what makes them an interesting character, so we're going to delve into that a little bit. They call themselves the Ultimate Despair, and as such, they want to spread despair. And they want to do this because they believe that life is boring and predictable unless despair is injected into it. This leads to a part where they suggest they use the students in the killing game because they were actually legitimately friends with them and wanted to share what they thought was a gift with them. They back out of this explanation shortly after, but at the same time, when they're defeated, they begin to celebrate feeling the despair of loss as if it was a good thing. In fact, there's more than once that they describe despair as a wonderful feeling, either for themselves or others. So I'm inclined to believe that in a twisted way, they do see despair as a gift. That said, they're clearly insane, and it's a broken and crazy motivation. And there's a bit of an unsettlingness and terror in the idea that someone with such broken and crazy ideals could convince others to join in those ideals. And with the writing, voice work, and overall presentation of the character, we get to experience how they could be pulling that off. The Mastermind is a very memorable character to just about everyone that's played this game, and the frankly terrifying amount of intellect and charisma they show in just a short time that they're in it helps cement that. After all, we get to see their scheming and mocking nature through our interactions with Monokuma. But aside from this game, probably the most important thing about the Mastermind and the story in this game is the effect it has on other villains and characters in the franchise. While the Mastermind might have been defeated, they cast a long shadow around the world. And as we see that influence in other games and media, we get a growing picture of Ultimate Despair's character more and more. And in the next game, we'll see just what kind of consequences that influence and reach had. Because like any good series, emphasis on good, the game and stories only get better from here. Mostly. Give this one a try if you can, and check out the others as well if you like it. They're all plenty cheap in various forms. Now that you've given me the time to go through what I think is good and bad about this game and why I think it should be given a chance to be looked at, I'm not necessarily looking for you to agree with my statements, but if you agree and you like this game series, like I do, then that's wonderful. But even if you don't like it and think that it's not that good a game, then hopefully in the comments you have a chance to share what you think needs to be fixed, or even if there was any good bits to it that you think should have been kept while other things were changed. And if you have the chance, go ahead and share with everybody what you feel is a better mystery or murder mystery game. One game and one video about the game isn't going to give us a full picture of all the good things that are out there. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and stay through to the credits for a short little mystery I'm giving to you just for a little bit of fun. In the videos I've been putting up recently, hold on, I know there was a lot of delays. In my more recent videos, there was one of them that was long enough to have 2 timestamps. These timestamps are 43 minutes and 8 seconds and 44 minutes and 35 seconds. And when you discover the significance of those timestamps, I promise the video that I'm working on for that is going to be hopefully interesting and have some unique discussion in it.